This has truly been a good 5 or 6 weeks, ain't it? Come on now, has it been a good 5 or 6 weeks? I think God is doing a lot of good things in our community, in our church, and He wanted me to say this tonight before I got started, that I think a lot of it is that people are being obedient to Him right now. And this movement that's happening in our community and all these churches and these revivals starting up, I think it's truly that people are moving on the mind of being obedient to Him. And that's the way we need to be. And I was going to work this morning, and my phone went off. And, of course, I couldn't read it till get my glasses on. So I pulled off the road, and it said Steve Ramey. And he pretty well told me, he said, if you got something, get up tonight. Well, I had something Sunday night, but just the way it works out. But we're going to talk about a process and a finished product tonight. Now, people might be saying, how in the world has he got Pop-Tarts? And going to tie it with Christ. Well, I don't know myself, but we're going to try it. But what you see right here is the finished product. When you go to the store, Kathy, and it's up on the shelf, and when we pick it up, we don't realize all the work that it took to get that product in front of you. And a lot of times, we're like this in our Christian walk, Kathy. We want to be a finished product. We want to get up and do God's work a lot of times, Colin, and we're not ready to be the finished product yet. And this is right here is when a lot of times whenever we fall, because we jump out, we get on the shelf. But as you see right here, there's a lot in this right here. And there's a lot that took place in all this. If we crack this open, and there's 4 Pop-Tarts in here, and they are individually wrapped. So when we open them up, and this is the most exciting part of it, ain't it? We open this baby up, and we look at this. It took so much work, Philip, to get this into this stage. But what we don't realize, it takes a lot of work when you see this thing going down the line in the plant to get it to this stage. And there's a lot of us, you got to go back to the beginning where it all started. Because there's a mixing process that takes place in order to get this started. Now, there's a lot of times that we are mixed. Whenever we are saved, Kathy, there's a mixing process already taking place in our lives. Just as the pastor had up here on the cross, and I love the one that when he got up here and he drilled into this and put a tap in here and stuff started flowing out and you catch it in the container. And that's just like us. When we caught this in our container, a mixing process started happening in our lives. And there's a lot to go into this. Let me read something to you first, and we'll talk about the Pop-Tart a little bit more. In Genesis 2 and 7, God, I'm going to read a little bit in front of this before I get to the verse. It says, God created man with the breath of life that man might have the Spirit as a kind of a receptacle to receive God. The producing of man's soul is also recorded in Genesis 2 and 7. Genesis 2 and 7 says that when the breath of life was breathed into the nostrils of the body of man, man became a what? A living soul. So, if we went back to that stage, we was nothing but the dirt. When he says we're going to make man and we're going to make him in what? In our image. When we look at ourselves, we wonder what God's going to look like. He looks like us. He says we're going to make him in our image. Our is like what we look like right now. Now, that's how I believe on that. Y'all can kick me out if you want to, but that's how I believe on that. So when he knelt down and he started mixing, what he started doing, he started mixing something on the ground. And when he started getting all this together, it became a shell. There was one time I was a shell. Even though I was walking and thought I was alive, I was a shell. I was about ready to experience life I didn't experience before. I was getting ready to start feeling like I never felt before. I was able to hear as I never heard before. And even smell a way I've never smelt before. Ain't his smell much sweeter than what we could ever smell? The fragrance of him in the room. You can feel him all around you. But when he started making this, when he knelt down and a mixing started happening. What was a shell, something started happening. Boy, you imagine being there and what started happening in that dirt, and all of a sudden them eyeballs opened, and God probably helped him right up like this, and he began to stand. He become what? He was a living soul. What did the word say right there? Became a living soul. God used two kinds of material, the dust for making man's body, and the breath of life for producing man's what? His spirit. When these two things came together right away, man become a living soul. That means the soul is the issue of the breath of life getting into the physical body of man. Mixing. You are a recipe that is still curing. You are a recipe that is still what? Working. Now, I worked at the Pop-Tart plant several times in the job that I used to be, Philip. We used to go around and do all their work. Well, when these things, right here, when this starts to mix, you are to see the mixing process. They've got a mixer. I'm talking, it's huge. And I'm talking things of butter that are big squares and ripping plastic off and just throw it in there. And then they get their dough. It looks like big old wads where they're bringing it in on wheelbarrows, and they'll throw it in there. And when they crank that thing, you talk about something of beating and a banging. Can you remember in your life when you started beating and a banging? Can you remember when you first got saved and you become alive and you started shaking like you never shook before, and your heart started beating like it never beat before, and you started thinking like you never thought before? Mixing. Something started taking place in your life that never was before, but you're not done yet. When all that mixes up, Kurt, it's got to be a certain thickness. And they add cream and they add all this other product. You know what? If it's too thick, it won't flow through the pipes. If it's too thin, it runs out on the other end where it comes out on the conveyor. Have you ever been a little bit thin? Have you ever been just a little bit too thick? Whenever you feel like you're not in His Word, when you feel like you're not in His grace, when you feel like you're not in the spot where you need to be, because you're not mixed right. Because you're looking somewhere else for the mixture. He's got the mixture. He's got the power that turns it on that starts mixing you. When this right here starts to form on the belt line, and they got these big tubes that comes down, and it's a perfect, just timed. The right amount. Ain't He always right? Ain't His mixture always right? What He pours into you is the right amount. What He instructs you to do, it's always the right way. The tools that He gives you, it's the right amount of tools that you need. And when you're in the battlefield or when you're in the valley and you're wondering if I've got enough or if I armed just right, if you got God on your side, you're mixed just right. Perfect. When you watch them things, they're in sequence, and when they spray on that belt line, it's big, and you're like, well, them looks like Pop-Tarts. And it's not done yet. It flows just a little bit farther. You know what happens then? They go into the oven. I think it's in Jeremiah. The potter's house. Jeremiah 18, I think what it says. The word came to Jeremiah from the Lord. It says, arise and go down to the potter's house, and there will there will be it will let your heart it will let you hear my words. So when I went down to the potter's house, there was a working at the wheel. Can you remember when he started working with you? And the vessel that making of clay was spoiled. And the potter's hands, what did he do? And he reworked. He what? He reworked something that was there before. He reworked something that wasn't completed. He reworked it, something that had a flaw in it. He reworked it into another vessel as it seemed good to the potter to do. When you are mixing, let me tell you something. When God puts His hands on you, it is very uncomfortable. If you're a Christian and you've never been in a stage where you feel uncomfortable, you're going to have to be a little obedient and let Him work with you a little bit. Because I don't know how many times when God puts His hands on you and nobody else, and He knows exactly how to form you. And can you imagine on the potter where he'll work that wheel? And that wheel, it's got to spin a what? Certain speed. If it's too fast, it'll deform the mud. If it's too slow, that speed has got to be pretty well within a certain RPMs to where it's going to work correctly. But you know what? He knows the right RPMs. He knows your life. He knows your struggle. Why do we even hide it from Him? What we are going through. Kathy, we act like we're a closed book. Now, I don't want you to see this, Lord. He knows everything about you. He knows every situation you're in. And He is there wanting to give you routes and escapes to get out of what you're in. And He's working with you, Charlie. He's got that speed just right. And all of a sudden, He's cracking His knuckles because you know what? He's about to get busy with your life. And when He puts His hands upon you, somebody might be saying, well, I'm trying to get God to give me direction. I've been there when you're struggling with direction and when you're struggling with what He's going to have me to do. And you don't know because you're unsure. But Kathy, when He puts your hands upon you, you better go the way He's forming you. Because He'll start smoothing them vessels up and pressing your thumbs up on you and pushing you just right. And He even talks about sometimes there'll be a little pebble or a hard spot. And when His thumbs, He'll work it up and He'll work right to the top. And that's your problem. What you're facing. All that uncomfortable, all that being uncomfortable, all that unknown, all that of don't know and need reassurance, it's about ready to come to the top. And when He works it up there and it rises up on the surface, you know what He does? Slow that wheel down just a little bit, pick it off, and it's gone. And He'll put His hands back up on you again and get you just right. And you're not done yet. You're not done yet. You're not done yet. You've just been sprayed on the conveyor. And now He's going to put you into the oven. To what? To where you can be glazed. Where you can be hardened. To where everything, what is in the materials start to develop, Heather. What is inside of you and I starts to work. Starts to click. Starts to show out. And we're going to talk about that right here in a minute. But as the potter is working with you, He's trying to get you formed just right. And just as soon as these things come out of the oven, and this icing then is put on right there, Regina, on the line. You talk about a good place to be in the morning? There was an older woman. She worked there a long time, Philip. And I come through there and I just make conversations with her and try to be friendly. I thought, boy, I wish she offered me one of them Pop-Tarts. There was one day I was walking up through there. She said, you want one? I was like, I sure do. You talking about a Pop-Tart tasting good, JR. When it came right out of the oven, that fresh icing was put on it. If I had a jug of milk, Lee, I'd still be there. She reached across that line, Kathy, and jerked it off. And I'm telling you what, it was hot. And I cracked it open, son, and I ate it, and I was like, oh, man, I'm in heaven. But we are in heaven. Because we're not done yet. Because there's a traveling period from then on. Because you know what? It ain't very long we're going to be wrapped. It ain't very long from that point, Kathy, we're going to be wrapped. But you know what? There's a traveling period that happens. When it keeps going down the line. A cooling process. A curing process. And it's going right on down the line. And I'm talking about conveyors running probably from here to out to probably Tulsa Highway, and they zigzag through that plant because you know why? They've got it engineered out, Lee. They know exactly how long it takes for that to be cured before it starts going in the packaging. And that's exactly how God knows us. To be cured in the process. We're going to get to the wrapping. This is going quicker than I thought it would. Well, thought we was. It's John 15. Let's talk about His peace for a minute. There's people walking around today and they're saying they have no peace. Christ says that peace I leave with you. John 14:27. We're going to read a little bit. It says, peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you. Not the world's peace. Not the peace of Facebook. Not the peace of talking to my mom and dad or my grandmother. Not the peace talking to my sister. His peace. People's walking around today, they have no peace. People walking around today, they're drinking all they can. They're consuming all they can because they have no peace because of the struggles of life. He says right here that peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you. Not as the world gives, give I unto you. Heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. Let your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. You have heard how I said unto you, I go away and come again to you. If you love me, you will rejoice because I said, I go unto the Father. For my Father there is greater than I. And now I have told you before it come to pass, that when it is come to pass, you might believe. Hereafter I will not talk much with you, for prince of the world comes and has nothing in me, but that the world may know that I love the Father, and as the Father gave me commandments, even so I do. Arise and let us go hence. He says next part down, I am the true vine, and my Father is the husband. Every branch in me that beareth not fruit, He taketh away. And every branch that bears fruit, He purges it. Don't you love being purged? Don't you love being retilled? Don't you love being trimmed back? We walk around so much and we think we're defeated. We walk around so much and we think that we're not part of His plan. We walk around so much and we feel like that we're just going through the motions. Well, how do you know that you're not being repurged during this time? Because a lot of times people don't realize that it takes patience to run this race. And a lot of times we think if we're not out front in the lead draft of the race, Philip, that we're not where we need to be. Well, how do we know that we're not supposed to be in the mid-pack and keep the draft just right? Because sometimes we got to learn to sit still when it's time to sit still. Because the cooling off part, how do we know that there's a time that we need to be praying for the brother or sister? How do we know that we need to be listening with the spiritual ear? And when He tells you to go anoint somebody, we need to go anoint somebody. Or when He tells you that you need to get up and sing a song, we'll get up and sing a song. Sometimes we think if we're not sitting on the shelf, being all pretty, that we're not doing His work. As long as there are breath in our bodies and we are doing His work and His will, we are doing what we're supposed to do with Him. Where did I stop at? Anybody know? (15 and 2). Okay. Every branch in me that beareth not fruit, He takes away, and every branch that bears fruit, He purges it, that it may bring forth what? More fruit. How do you know that you're getting ready to bring more fruit? How do you know that you're not about ready to multiply? How do you know you're not about ready to be influential with some people? Just to share a little story with what's going on in my life right now. I thought for years that I was going to be moved a certain way in my life. And right now, I can see the revealing starting to take place. And I'm not going to share that right now, but for years, Pastor knows a little bit about it, but for years, I thought I was going a certain route. And I was looking at it totally wrong, Philip, and I thought I was being worked up for a certain thing. But little did I know that something was arising in front of me, and I didn't even have no clue what was about ready to happen. But the thing about it is when it's time to multiply, you got to be ready to step into position, and whenever it's time to go, you need to go. Because a lot of times that's where we're at. We're not ready to move when He says move. What's the very first thing we say? I'm not ready. I'm not fit. Yes, you are. If you've got the living God living inside of you. Because you talking about a mixing thing, He gave you the breath of life, which created the soul and everything, but it's also something to come, because when you are saved and then you receive the Holy Ghost, Kathy, you are a complete package, sealed and wrapped individually. You know what? When that thing is sealed up, you can't even tell what flavor that is. But you know what's in it, because what? The logo. When you're wrapped up with the Holy Ghost, I can't see really your gifts, what you've got. We have so many people, and I got tickled with Brother Gabe here lately, and things going on in Brother Gabe's life, and he thought he never would go this route, thought that this would never happen. You know what? Because he didn't know he was wrapped. He didn't know what was inside of him, what was going to be revealed. He didn't know what flavor he was. You don't know what flavor you are right now, but you're trying to figure it out. You might be strawberry. Strawberry might be speaking in tongues. You might be grape, and grape might be slaying in the Spirit. You might be chocolate, and chocolate might be another gift. But you don't know, but we're wrapped all the way around with Him. His protection, sealed until what? Till the day of redemption. You are wrapped with Him. You are clothed with Him. You are clothed with righteousness. You are a child of God. Wrapped by the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And we walk around and we think we're defeated. You ever notice why that's reflecting? Because that's what we're supposed to be, is reflection of Him. Whenever that right there reflects the light, you can just shake it in the light, and they know that you're reflecting Him. But you know what? He knows what flavor you are. He knows what you have inside, because He embedded it in you. Even though it's us. Man, I don't know if anybody's getting anything out of this, but I am. Do you know how you figured out what flavor you are, Colin? Kathy, he showed me something today. He said, Aaron, sometimes people have got it all right. When that man texts me, son, God come in my truck on the rest of the day. He says, son, people's trying to figure out what flavor they are inside. But the bad problem is, they're out here trying to look and strive to find it, and all they got to do is look on the inside and they'll discover. If they'll look to the inside, if they'll dwell in me a little bit, if they'll look towards me a little bit, they'll know exactly what fruits they're able to bear. Some trees bear oranges, some trees bear grapes, some trees bear apples, but we are all bearing fruit. The main thing is whatever we're bearing, we bear a lot of it. Whatever your gift is, use it wisely. Whatever He's planted inside of you, share it among everybody else. That is where we're... So, you know what? I went through life a long time, Brother Ralph, trying to figure Him out, whenever all of a sudden all I got to do is look inside of here and look inside of my heart, and He's already got it what I'm supposed to do. Sometimes, JR, we're looking in the wrong spots. That's why we're searching in other things. We think that it's going to give us the answer, Rita. We'll read thousands of books trying to figure it out, written by different pastors and everything. We'll watch gospel music left and right. And all you got to do, Lou, is get right here and talk to Him, and He'll reveal it to you. He will reveal it to you. You say, well, how do I do that? Ask Him. You want to know what flavor you are? Ask Him. What flavor am I? And I'm telling you what. Now, if you want to ask Him, you better be ready. Because it might be the flavor you don't want. Because a lot of times in life, Rita, when I said, Lord, I'm wanting to do this, I'm going to jump out there and do this, He said, okay, Aaron, let me tell you something. You do this. Well, that's not exactly what I was thinking about, Lord. But Aaron, that's what I mowed you to do. That's the flavor I planted inside of you. Little do you know, Aaron, you're equipped. Little do you know, Aaron, I've equipped you with it. You may have to figure it out through me, Aaron, but little do you know, that's what you're supposed to do. Where's we at? I'm going to go to 3. Now you are clean. You are clean throughout the word which I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, except it abide in the vine. And you might be saying, brother, what is abide? Well, I'm going to tell you what abide is. If I can find it. And I was so pressed for time today, I had to just run something off. That's why I got all these notes. Abiding. I run across this, and this right here is really good. Abiding is really isn't until John 15 and 10 that we get a picture of what it looks like to abide in Jesus. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in His love. To abide in Jesus means to keep His commandments, and to keep His commandments means to love God with all our hearts. Not part of it, not 40% of it, not 60%, not do it on Monday and skip Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday and come back on Friday. All of our hearts and souls and minds, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. Now that's hard sometimes. Especially when they got a dog that will not hush at 1 o'clock in the morning. Matthew 22 and 37 through 39, one way that will display our love for God is through our trust. That's where it's at. We have to trust Him. Prayers. We right here, this telling exactly what I'm talking about. We want what flavor we are. We got to trust Him. He's going to reveal it to us. And we got to trust Him. That's what's in prayer and devotion to Him. I will abide through relationship. We'll pursue in love. We pray in love. We obey in love. And there is good news. We love Jesus because He first loved us. 1 John 4:19. We didn't choose Him. He chose us. And He chose us to walk out our faith in obedience in Him. John 15:16. Apart from Christ, we cannot do anything. No matter what you want to do, no matter what you want to set your mind for, you can work 24 hours a day. Without Him, you will not accomplish it. John 15:5, this is also good news to the weary person who thinks he must muster up strength. All right, midstream. Oh, here it is. I thought, boy, that's getting good. I'm going to cut it off. To pursue and know Christ and love his neighbor and fruit, Jesus emphasizes he provides the grace and strength. The fruit that Jesus speaks of is simply evidence and relationship with him. It is a relationship that he initiates through and by the sovereignty and love. A little bit later, he goes back. He says, I'm going to go back to the Father, and then we're going to make our abode with you. And that's when we're protected. Because we don't like to run this race alone, do we? Well, for one thing, there's two in a wrapper. A lot of us is married. What he says, Kathy, says you are one, you and your husband. You know what? There's two in here. One there, one there. You know what? Just so happens we're the same flavor, because if you're going to work together in a marriage, Rita, you got to be together, don't you, as one. You got to be able to come in agreement with one another. We both have the same flavor because our work is together. He says, I want you as one. That's how a relationship works. Then he says, you're not alone. There's more in the package. And they're individually wrapped. Don't he put you in a good church to where there's unity, to where you can grow, and then we are protected by him. What did he do to Job when Job lost everything? He had a hedge built around him, Regina. Even though everything, you can tear the whole store down, but them are in that protected. Yeah, they can get squashed and everything. We might get back to the mixing part. You know what? These things can be in a flood. You can pick that cardboard up, and it's barely together. Sometimes our life feels like it's barely together, Philip, but it's still wrapped with his love and his grace. Even though we're wore out from the weather of the storm, Charlie, but it's still together, and you can jerk these things out, and a lot of times you can open one up, and it's eatable. That's the way he is. He wants you to be protected. No matter where you're going, no matter where the display is. What's the result at the end? It's for the consumption of others, ain't it? These are intended to be consumed. These are intended to be devoured. Ain't that way salvation is? Salvation is supposed to be what consumed in our souls and devoured into our spirit so it can grow. What's this right here supposed to be? Is sharing of the gospel. And everybody gets a piece of it. I'm telling you, if he has been on a movement in this church here in the last 6 weeks. And I don't know if people, and they've been some people that's came up and they've got a hold of it. But I'm telling you what, Tim, this water has been troubled a lot lately. A lot lately. And used to, they had to wait for one time a year, Kathy, for it to be troubled. I'm telling you, every week right now, he is coming down and he is working with people. But you know what the problem is? You know what the problem is? I noticed up here they had all these problems up here on this thing. And I wish Pastor ripped it down. Because I'm done with it. But they ought to be hung somewhere. You know, for that way people can look every now and then. But you know what, Kathy? I probably fit one time in my life probably 90% of them on there. And there's days, Pastor, that I've not conquered all of them. But you know what? I think sometimes when we come in, we are wanting to look at the problem too much. Because then we feel like we're unworthy to walk in His grace and walk in His newness. Because when we look at the problem, and I think a lot of times that's the problem with us, we come to church thinking that it's time to get ourselves right again, but you're already right. If you've got the Holy Ghost inside of you and He's working with you, then you're right with God, aren't you? If it's troubling you when you come in here because you look up there and you say, well, I've done that this week, or I've done that last week, and it's bothering you, He's working with you. He's ready for you to get off of that and to look at the pool. Because it's time to get in the pool. I'm telling you, He is wanting to move in this community so bad. And we think that He's going to make a move. No, let me tell you something. He's ready to make a movement. He's ready to make a movement, Philip. His time is ready at all times, but it is up to us to get it right. We're saying, well, He's going to move one. No. He's ready. But it's up to us. Every man that come across Him in the Bible, and when they come to realization what their life was, what it was meant to be, then all of a sudden they took off. Look at Peter. I'm going to talk about Peter just a couple minutes, Pastor. I'm going to sit down. Do you know what hung in the balance that day with Peter when he was right there at the boat with Christ? And he done the miracle and all the fish come in. Do you know what held in the balance right there with one decision? With one decision. What was Peter going to be? We read about Peter from that moment on, the walk he had with God. And here he is, he didn't know Christ. And all of a sudden, Christ done this big major demonstration in front of you. And then all of a sudden he says, well, Peter, what'd you think about that? And do you know what held in the balance that very next thing, what Peter was going to say? A lot. Here's a man who was going to do the preaching and be pretty well the head person with the disciples. And they was people that even got healed as he walked by one time, wasn't it? The shadow, is that right, Pastor? When he walked through the town, and as he walked by, his shadow was cast over people, and people was healed. Do you know what held in the balance right here when Christ said, what'd you think about that, Peter? I'm asking you tonight, what do you think about that? How do you know you're not the next Peter? How do you know you're not the next John the Baptist? How do you know you're not the next Moses? All with one decision. And that day right there, when he first come encounter with Peter, he respectfully answered him and said, okay, Master, I'll take you fishing. And then a lot of times we walk in here, we walk in this church. Brother Gabe walked into church a long time, calling him Master. Calling him Master. I knew that boy a long time. He had it a long time. But I believe he truly got something there one day. And it took a lot for Gabe to get there. I've known Gabe a long time, people. But then one day, Gabe started calling him Lord. And that's what Peter done that day. He said, Lord, get away from me, for I'm a sinful man. He knew who he was. He knew who he was standing in front of. He knew he was standing in front of the Creator, the one that hung the heavens and the earth. He knew he was standing in front of that man right there, and he said, Lord, get away from me because I'm unworthy. What he went on a little bit further on down the road, he said, no. He said, I'm unworthy for you to wash my feet. He said, well, Peter, if you don't want me to do that, I'll have no part with you. He said, well, then that wash me all over. That's where we're at sometimes. We want it, Kurt, and we're like, no, Lord, don't wash my feet. How do you know that you're not going to get something right now? The next big step in your life, and you've been searching for a long time. You've read a lot of books, and you've studied, and you've prayed. It's only one decision. And it's only one answer. Yes, here I am, Lord. A lot of people struggles, Pastor, in this life. I struggled for years. For years, Stacy. I struggled in a Christian walk, wondering everything. And all of a sudden, it just it's like a light bulb went off. Click. And all of a sudden, I was like, why do I worry over that stuff, Lord? Because He is inside of me. No matter what, I've lost friends in this life through over foolish mistakes. I've lost acquaintances before, but you know what? I've never lost Him. I know what it's like to hurt and lose people. I know what it's like that people may talk about you and everything. I've been there. I've walked through it. But as long as I've got Him, as long as I'm in His grace and doing what He wants me to do, Regina, everything else is going to be okay. And we have to get to that point when we just call Him Lord. What do you bid me to do? And what did He tell him right away? What did Christ do? He said, well, Peter, He gave him the answer that quick. Because He said, Lord, what am I going to do? He said, well, Peter, I'm going to make you fishermen of men. Right away, Philip, he knew what flavor he's going to be. And a lot of times, you know what? We'll call Him Lord, and then we want to walk away because we got what we wanted off of Him. Instead of waiting, Kathy, for the instructions, well, He says, because He'll tell you exactly what it's going to be. What did Moses say one time? He said, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Sometimes we got to stand still.